Welcome back to Major Antonio's presentation of London to Ladysmith via Pretoria by Winston S. Churchill. Today, 125 years ago, the future Prime Minister was imprisoned by the Boers in South Africa. We shall follow his footsteps as he narrates his adventures himself. Subscribe to our channel so as not to miss anything. Chapter 8 Prisoners of War. Pretoria, November 24, 1899.
The position of a prisoner of war is painful and humiliating. A man tries his best to kill another, and finding that he cannot succeed, asks his enemy for mercy. The laws of war demand that this should be accorded, but it is impossible not to feel a sense of humbling obligation to the captor from whose hand we take our lives. All military pride, all independence of spirit must be put aside. These may be carried to the grave, but not into captivity. We must prepare ourselves to submit, to obey, to endure. Certain things, sufficient food and water and protection during good behavior, the victor must supply or be a savage, but beyond these, all else is favor. Favors must be accepted from those with whom we have a long and bitter quarrel, from those who feel fiercely that we seek to do them cruel injustice. The dog who has been whipped must be thankful for the bone that is flung to him. When the prisoners captured after the destruction of the armored train had been disarmed and collected in a group, we found that there were 56 unwounded or slightly wounded men, besides the more serious cases lying on the scene of the fight. The Boers crowded round, looking curiously at their prize, and we ate a little chocolate that by good fortune, for we had had no breakfast, was in our pockets, and sat down on the muddy ground to think. The rain streamed down from a dark leaden sky, and the coats of the horses steamed in the damp. "Vorwärts," said a voice, and forming in a miserable procession, 2 wretched officers, a bare-headed, tattered correspondent, 4 sailors with straw hats and R.M.S. Tartar in gold letters on the ribbons, ill-timed jauntiness, some 50 soldiers and volunteers, and 2 or 3 railwaymen we started, surrounded by the active Boer horsemen. Yet, as we climbed the low hills that surrounded the place of combat, I looked back and saw the engine steaming swiftly away beyond Frere Station. Something at least was saved from the ruin. Information would be carried to the troops at Estcourt. A good many of the troops and some of the wounded would escape. The locomotive was itself of value, and perhaps in saving all these things, some little honor had been saved as well. "You need not walk fast," said a Boer in excellent English. "Take your time." Then another, seeing me hatless in the downpour, threw me a soldier's cap, one of the Irish Fusilier caps, taken probably near Ladysmith. So they were not cruel men, these enemy. That was a great surprise to me, for I had read much of the literature of this land of lies, and fully expected every hardship and indignity. At length we reached the guns which had played on us for so many minutes, 2 strangely long barrels sitting very low on carriages of 4 wheels, like a brake in which horses are exercised. They looked offensively modern, and I wondered why our army had not got field artillery with fixed ammunition and 8,000 yards range. Some officers and men of the Staats artillery, dressed in a drab uniform with blue facings, approached us. The commander, Adjutant Roos, as he introduced himself, made a polite salute. He regretted the unfortunate circumstances of our meeting. He complimented the officers on their defense. Of course, it was hopeless from the first. He trusted his fire had not annoyed us. We should, he thought, understand the necessity for them to continue. Above all, he wanted to know how the engine had been able to get away and how the line could have been cleared of wreckage under his guns. In fact, he behaved as a good professional soldier should, and his manner impressed me. We waited here near the guns for half an hour, and meanwhile the Boers searched amid the wreckage for dead and wounded. A few of the wounded were brought to where we were and laid on the ground, but most of them were placed in the shelter of one of the overturned trucks. As I write, I do not know with any certainty what the total losses were, but the Boers say that they buried 5 dead, sent 10 seriously wounded into Ladysmith, and kept 3 severely wounded in their field ambulances. Besides this, we are told that 16 severely wounded escaped on the engine, and we have with the prisoners 7 men, including myself, slightly wounded by splinters or injured in the derailment. If this be approximately correct, it seems that the casualties in the hour and a half of fighting were between 35 and 40. Not many, perhaps, considering the fire, but out of 120 enough at least. After a while, we were ordered to march on, and looking over the crest of the hill, a strange and impressive sight met the eye. Only about 300 men had attacked the train, and I had thought that this was the enterprise of a separate detachment, but as the view extended, I saw that this was only a small part of a large, powerful force marching south under the personal direction of General Joubert to attack Estcourt. Behind every hill, thinly veiled by the driving rain, masses of mounted men, arranged in an orderly disorder, were halted, and from the rear, long columns of horsemen rode steadily forward. Certainly, I did not see less than 3,000, and I did not see nearly all. Evidently, an important operation was in progress, and a collision either at Estcourt or Mui River impended. This was the long-expected advance, worse late than never. Our captors conducted us to a rough tent, which had been set up in a hollow in one of the hills, and which we concluded was General Joubert's headquarters. Here we were formed in a line, and soon surrounded by a bearded crowd of Boers cloaked in mackintosh. I explained that I was a special correspondent and asked to see General Joubert, but in the throng it was impossible to tell who were the superiors. My credentials were taken from me by a man who said he was a field cornet and who promised that they should be laid before the general forthwith. Meanwhile, we waited in the rain, and the Boers questioned us. My certificate as a correspondent bore a name better known than liked in the Transvaal. Moreover, some of the private soldiers had been talking. "You are the son of Lord Randolph Churchill?" said a Scottish Boer abruptly. I did not deny the fact. Immediately, there was much talking, and all crowded round me, looking and pointing, while I heard my name repeated on every side. "I am a newspaper correspondent," I said, "and you ought not to hold me prisoner." The Scottish Boer laughed. "Oh," he said, "we do not catch lords' sons every day." Whereat they all chuckled and began to explain that I should be allowed to play football at Pretoria. All this time I was expecting to be brought before General Joubert, from whom I had some hopes I should obtain assurances that my character as a press correspondent would be respected. But suddenly, a mounted man rode up and ordered the prisoners to march away towards Colenso. The escort, 20 horsemen, closed round us. I addressed their leader and demanded either that I should be taken before the general or that my credentials should be given back. But the so-called field cornet was not to be seen. The only response was "Voorwaarts." And as it seemed useless, undignified, and even dangerous to discuss the matter further with these people, I turned and marched off with the rest. We tramped for 6 hours across sloppy fields and along tracks deep and slippery with mud, while the rain fell in a steady downpour and soaked everyone to the skin. The Boer escort told us several times not to hurry and to go our own pace, and once they allowed us to halt for a few moments. But we had had neither food nor water, and it was with a feeling of utter weariness that I saw the tin roofs of Colenso rise in the distance. We were put into a corrugated iron shed near the station, the floors of which were 4 inches deep, with torn railway forms and account books. Here we flung ourselves down exhausted, and what with the shame, the disappointment, the excitement of the morning, the misery of the present, and physical weakness, it seemed that love of life was gone, and I thought almost with envy of a soldier I had seen during the fight lying quite still on the embankment, secure in the calm philosophy of death from the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. After the Boers had lit 2 fires, they opened one of the doors of the shed and told us we might come forth and dry ourselves. A newly slaughtered ox lay on the ground, and strips of his flesh were given to us. These we toasted on sticks over the fire and ate greedily, though since the animal had been alive 5 minutes before, one felt a kind of cannibal. Other Boers, not of our escort, who were occupying Colenso, came to look at us. With 2 of these, who were brothers, English by race, Afrikanders by birth, Boers by choice, I had some conversation. The war, they said, was going well. Of course, it was a great matter to face the power and might of the British Empire. Still, they were resolved. They would drive the English out of South Africa forever, or else fight to the last man. I said, "You attempt the impossible, Pretoria will be taken by the middle of March. What hope have you of withstanding 100,000 soldiers?" "If I thought," said the younger of the two brothers vehemently, "that the Dutchman would give in because Pretoria was taken, I would smash my rifle on those metals this very moment. We will fight forever." I could only reply, "Wait and see how you feel when the tide is running the other way. It does not seem so easy to die when death is near." The man said, "I will wait." Then we made friends. I told him that I hoped he would come safely through the war and live to see a happier and a nobler South Africa under the flag which had been good enough for his forefathers. And he took off his blanket, which he was wearing with a hole in the middle like a cloak, and gave it to me to sleep in. So we parted, and presently, as night fell, the field cornet who had us in charge bade us carry a little forage into the shed to sleep on, and then locked us up in the dark, soldiers, sailors, officers, and correspondent, a broken-spirited jumble. I could not sleep. Vexation of spirit, a cold night, and wet clothes withheld sweet oblivion. The rights and wrongs of the quarrel, the fortunes and chances of the war, forced themselves on the mind. What men they were, these Boers! I thought of them as I had seen them in the morning riding forward through the rain. Thousands of independent riflemen, thinking for themselves, possessed of beautiful weapons, led with skill, living as they rode without commissariat or transport or ammunition column, moving like the wind, and supported by iron constitutions and a stern, hard Old Testament God who should surely smite the Amalekites hip and thigh. And then, above the rainstorm that beat loudly on the corrugated iron, I heard the sound of a chaunt. The Boers were singing their evening psalm, and the menacing notes, more full of indignant war than love and mercy, struck a chill into my heart, so that I thought, after all, that the war was unjust, that the Boers were better men than we, that heaven was against us, that Ladysmith, Mafeking, and Kimberley would fall, that the Estcourt garrison would perish, that foreign powers would intervene, that we should lose South Africa, and that would be the beginning of the end. So for the time I despaired of the empire, nor was it till the morning sun, all the brighter after the rainstorms, all the warmer after the chills, struck in through the windows, that things reassumed their true colors and proportions.
This concludes today's reading of London to Ladysmith via Pretoria, by Winston S. Churchill. Join us also on November 30th for the subsequent chapter. Subscribe to Major Antonio's channel. Thanks for listening, and so long.